following on some breaking news this morning as Crystal Magnum, the woman who accused 3 Duke Lacrosse players of raping her in 2006, has confessed that she lied. In an interview from a North Carolina prison where Magnum is serving time for an unrelated second-degree murder conviction, admitted to lying about players sexually assaulting her at a team party where she was working as a stripper.
She continued to make the false claims in her 2008 memoir after the case was thrown out against the players in 2007. Magnum now says that she, quote, made up a story that wasn't true because I wanted validation from people and not from God. I hope that they can forgive me. This was a very famous case for our very youngest viewers. It is hard to perhaps emphasize just what a big deal this was. It was a case that sort of took over a large swathe of the American media when it first happened, in part because it seemed to fit into a very emblematic picture of American life for a while. You had these 3 white lacrosse players who were from very affluent backgrounds. You had this impoverished, troubled woman who was working as a stripper, and she accused them of rape. And then that all fell apart, and there were various reasons why it fell apart, including DNA evidence, or rather a lack of DNA evidence to suggest guilt and all of that. I remember this case very vividly because I had only been in the US about less than 3 years at the time, and I remember going to Durham to report on this, and there was so much going on around the case itself. You know, there's a whole other subtext about tensions between the city of Durham and Duke University and all of that. I tend to see it as a very tragic case all around, but obviously you should not make false allegations of rape. I guess Crystal Magnum deserves some level of credit for now fessing up and seeking forgiveness for it, but there we go.
Yeah, this is a mess, and I think, you know, people who have followed the case and read a lot of the details are not probably super surprised by this.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of misconduct by the prosecutor in this case, who hid from the defense multiple elements of the DNA testing that appeared to exonerate the members of the Duke Lacrosse team because their DNA was not found on Crystal, although several other men's was. There, from my memory, I was 13 at the time, but I have gone back and done plenty of research on the case since, as a precursor to the Me Too movement. The testing that was completed in regards to the sexual assault, I believe, did not really suggest that she was beaten or sexually assaulted in the way that she claimed. And then there were also a lot of other inconsistencies with changing the number of men who raped her, what time the rapes allegedly occurred, just all kinds of issues with the story from the get. But I remember seeing this on TV constantly when I was, 13 years old, and noticing the almost glee and joy and gloating of commentators who really did put this case in the framework of a black versus white, low income versus wealthy kind of intra-class racial struggle, as opposed to looking at what the facts of the case actually were. These Duke Lacrosse players were eventually awarded, I believe, in a civil suit with tens of millions of dollars, which is as it should be. Their reputations were absolutely destroyed for years while this case played out. And still afterwards, I mean, even if the case is dropped, people hear the initial accusation, and if they're not following all the way through to the end, your name is still attached to that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I'm glad that, she eventually came forward and gave them the ability to say she said that she made it all up, as opposed to just the case fell apart. But I'll refrain from saying much else about her because I think what she did was so heinous to these boys.
I think that I think this is basically the situation, of course, is A, you shouldn't make false allegations, and B, there was obvious prosecutorial misconduct involved here, and Mike Nifong, the prosecutor involved, was in fact disbarred at one point for the various misdeeds that you talk about. So, I mean, I think there was, as I recall it at that time, a rush to judgment, to use a cliche, about the idea that obviously these guys were, you know, essentially rich white kids who had taken advantage of this poor black woman. And it had become part of this narrative. I mean, even the fact that they were lacrosse players, and that is a sport that is very much associated.
It's fratty, and upper white class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of that stuff became part of the mix. And then it emerged, you know, over time that the facts simply didn't match the allegations. I just felt, yes, what she did was heinous in the sense of make a false allegation of that gravity. It does not excuse it, but just to say it, that, you know, she came from a very dysfunctional background. My memory is there was some suggestion of sort of mental troubles as well, or mental unwellness. Of course, that doesn't justify accusing people of things that they didn't do. And then she went on in 2013 to be convicted of second-degree murder in the stabbing death of a then boyfriend or ex-boyfriend. Just a mess all round, and no winners from it. And I mean, it is, I guess, rather belated at this point, 18 years on, to then be saying, yeah, sorry, I made that up.
Exactly. It's not enough, I think, in any sense of the word. And I also, of course, view this, as I mentioned, in the framework of the Me Too movement, which came much later. Really, 2019, I guess, was when that kind of kicked off in response to the Harvey Weinstein allegations, and then kind of ran rampant. But it seems like, despite how bombastic this case was, despite how many issues there were with it, despite the eventual exoneration of the accused, Americans didn't really learn a whole lot from this. It wasn't that much later, you know, just about 10 years or so, that we had the Rolling Stone running with this fantastical UVA rape story, that we have Babe.net running the Aziz Ansari bad hookup story, and so many other similar stories that only serve to undercut and make it more difficult for legitimate accusers to get justice for the crimes committed against them. And there was this mantra that was put out during the Me Too movement of believe all women. And no, sorry, that's not how it works. You don't get a free pass because of your gender. I understand the underlying sentiment that it is difficult for women who have been sexually assaulted to come forward, that sometimes they aren't believed, and that it's often a he said, she said. But that doesn't mean we throw out the entire idea of innocent until proven guilty in the underpinnings of our justice system, because one innocent person going to jail or having their life destroyed is one person too many. And our system is designed to minimize the number of people who are not guilty, who are innocent, who face consequences wrongly for their actions. We always err on the side of the accused being innocent until proven guilty. And we just tried to completely dispense with that notion during the Me Too movement, and I find that to be so problematic.
The Believe All Women slogan was one of those slogans that was bad because it had to be explained, and that's never good in a slogan. If you took that at face value, like defund the police, which was the social justice equivalent, it's wrong, right? You shouldn't either remove all funding from the police or believe all women, regardless of whether there is any corroborating evidence or counter evidence or all of that. The Believe All Women thing, as I understand it, emanated from the better justified belief that when women made complaints, the default was often to disbelieve them, or to say, well, didn't you do anything to bring this upon yourself, or to jump to the conclusion that a encounter that a woman was saying was not consensual, in fact was consensual. And so there was a desire, I think, to offer a corrective to that social pattern. The problem is when that does go too far, and when people are believed making false allegations, obviously that perpetuates its own injustice. That's, I think, where it comes from. I am in the tricky position of mostly agreeing with you, but being more sympathetic to the injustices that give rise to those kind of slogans in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the pendulum just swung way too far in the other direction. And and a fun story about this, I don't know how fun it is, but a story nonetheless. I gave a speech at American University to the Young Americans for Liberty group during the height of this slogan, and titled my talk, "No, Don't Believe All Women," which was meant to, of course, be a little bit provocative, but also to serve as a counterbalance to what was the prevailing narrative at the time. And in my speech, I talked a lot about the history of innocent black men getting dogged by accusations of sexual assault as a form of weaponization. And as I was talking about cases like Emmett Till, I heard people outside of the room chanting, "Believe all women." And I just found that dichotomy to be a fundamental part of the problem of how we talk about sexual assault and our justice system in this country. And I'm glad that we've sort of left that whole hashtag movement in the dustbin.
Yeah, and hopefully move to a more nuanced and more realistic position on all of those difficult topics. We will have more topics, perhaps a couple of lighter topics, to talk about on Rising right after this.